Welcome to the complete collection of creepy riddles and cryptic tales. Volumes 1 through 12. Check the description for the individual videos and answers to the riddles. Volume 1.
Number 1. I was really scared last night after I read a really creepy story on the scary website I always visit. What made it worse was that my parents were away, so I was alone in the house. I switched on all the lights in my room and in the hall leading to the bathroom. That calmed me down a little. The only scary thing that happened was when I finished showering and went back to my room, I switched on the light, and at that exact moment, my backpack fell off the chair. That made me jump. Number 2. A few days ago, I was invited to a dinner at a friend's house. Strange thing is, my friend recently got involved with some weird religious cult. And while I was there, he served up some type of meat, but he wouldn't tell me what kind of meat it was. It kind of freaked me out. For a second, I wondered if it was human meat, but then after I ate it, I knew it definitely wasn't human meat. Number 3. Yesterday, I went to the library to borrow some books. I asked the librarian where the horror section was, and she directed me to some shelves that were in the corner against the wall. I was browsing through the titles when I came to a gap in the books, and a cute girl peering through at me from the other side. Our eyes met for a moment, and she smiled. I spent 10 minutes trying to work up the courage to start a conversation with her. But, in the end, I just picked out 3 books and brought them over to the librarian's counter. Why am I such a wuss? If I'd been brave enough to talk to that girl, I could have probably got her number. Number 4. Studying to become a doctor is really hard work, but I scored 100% at my autopsy exam on Friday. I can't take all the credit though. My roommate was a huge help. I wish I could thank him, but he's no longer with us. R.I.P. Jacob. Number 5. A few years ago, my older brother went crazy. He stabbed my sister to death and attacked my parents. The police managed to subdue him before he killed them too. He's been in a mental hospital ever since, and we never visit him, with good reason. This morning we got a letter from him in the mail. The postmark was from yesterday. I opened it, and inside I found a strange note. Tonight, the wind blows colder still. All I know is darkness, never light. The pain will break strongest hearts. My dreams still escape my grasp. I couldn't make sense of it, so I took it to the kitchen and gave it to my mother. As soon as she finished reading it, her face went pale and the note slipped from her fingers. She rushed to the front door and let out the most blood-curdling scream I'd ever heard.
Volume 2.
Number 1. A few days ago, my friend sent me an email with a video link in it. When I watched the video, I was horrified. It showed him committing suicide. In the video, he tied a rope around his neck and jumped off a chair. How could he send me something like that? His funeral is tomorrow, but I can't bring myself to go. Am I a bad person? Number 2. A few minutes ago, I was taking a shower and I heard a scream from the living room. I got out of the bath and ran out there naked. When I got there, I saw a burglar standing over the dead bodies of my mom, my dad, and my sister. When the burglar saw me, he jumped out the window and ran off. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. Number 3. I'm on holiday in Bangkok, Thailand, and I'm staying in a cheap hotel. The locals say this hotel is haunted, but you know how Thai people are. They're very superstitious. However, I did have one scary incident last night. I took a bath, and while I was blow-drying my hair, I switched on the TV. Suddenly, a horrifying, old, white-faced woman appeared on the screen. It gave me such a fright, I dropped the hairdryer into the bathtub. That knocked out all the lights in my room. I had to rely on the light from the TV to get dressed. Then, when I went down to the lobby, I found out that my little accident had knocked out the electricity in the whole hotel. The hotel manager wasn't very happy with me. Number 4. One day I was watching the news when the house I used to live in as a child came up on the screen. It was a breaking news story, and the reporter said that the dead body of a young girl was found buried in the backyard. I was so shocked I grabbed my phone and called my dad immediately to tell him about it. "Dad, are you watching the news?" I asked. "No," he replied. "Why?" "Well, you never guess what happened," I gushed, breathlessly. "Remember that old house we used to live in? Well, it's on the news. They found a dead body buried in the backyard. The police are questioning the owners right now." "What?" he replied. "Are you serious? Wow, that's really scary." "Yeah, it's scary," I said. "What if it was there back when we were living in the house? We could have been walking back and forth in the garden all the time, completely unaware that there was a corpse beneath our feet. It freaks me out just thinking about it." "Me too," he said. "I never noticed a thing while we were living there, but it's a scary thought nonetheless. Of course I feel bad for the parents." "Yeah, I do too. They must have been worried sick." "I wonder who buried her there," he said. "It gives me the creeps to think someone would do that." "Well, the police are investigating it now," I said. "They'll probably get to the bottom of it eventually." "I hope so," said my dad.
Volume 3.
Story 1. Taking out the trash. This morning, I was awakened by banging and clattering. My wife was downstairs making breakfast. She doesn't usually make this much noise. I went downstairs to the kitchen. My wife had her back to me and she was cutting something up in the sink. I said good morning, but she ignored me. Then I remembered what happened last night. My wife caught me cheating on her, and we had a violent argument. So today she must be giving me the silent treatment. How long can that last? I sat down at the table and asked her when breakfast would be ready, but she continued to ignore me. Then I looked at the clock. It was almost time to go to work. I raced upstairs and hurriedly changed into my suit. When I came back down, my wife was out in the garden doing something. I always take out the trash before I go to work, so I grabbed the big plastic bag in the kitchen. It was unusually heavy. She hadn't just double-bagged it. She'd used about 4 or 5 black garbage bags. I dragged it out to the end of the driveway and left it on the curb. It was so heavy. I wondered what was in there. My curiosity got the better of me. I untied the knot and took a look inside. Story 2. Apartment building. There's an old vacant apartment building near me. The city is planning to demolish it soon. I often pass by it on the way home from work. A number of people have committed suicide there by jumping to their deaths. Because of that, they say the ghosts of the suicide victims still haunt the building. At night, the area is quite eerie because there are still no streetlights. One night I had to stay late at work and it was almost 11 p.m. when I was walking home. I was passing by the apartment building and it was creeping me out. Just then I looked up and spotted a shadowy figure on the roof. I thought it was a ghost. My heart almost stopped. Then I took a closer look and I could make out a person standing there on the roof. All of a sudden the person jumped. I watched as the figure fell to the ground and landed with a sickening thud. It was horrible. I rushed over and saw that it was a woman. She was lying in a pool of blood on the concrete. Her head was split open and her arms and legs were twisted at odd angles. I immediately called an ambulance on my cell phone. The whole thing upset me so much I was shaking and I thought I was going to be sick. Some people must have heard the sound of her hitting the concrete because when I looked up, people in the apartment building were leaning over their balconies trying to get a look. Soon the ambulance came and took her away. When I got home, I couldn't sleep a wink. I couldn't get the memory of that horrible scene out of my mind. Story 3. Argument. There was a married couple who lived in an apartment building with their young daughter. The husband and wife never got along and were always arguing. One day they started to quarrel over something small. Their daughter was sitting on the windowsill listening to them shout at each other. The argument turned into a big screaming match. The daughter couldn't stand to listen to it anymore, so she left. When the parents realized their daughter was gone, they looked out the window and saw her outside. They felt very guilty, so they followed her. Story 4. Curse. I found an ancient book on black magic. It explains how to put a curse on someone. This is what is written in the instructions. If you follow these steps exactly, the curse will be placed on the person of your choosing. However, if you make even one small mistake, the curse will be placed on you instead. So be careful. Do you still wish to proceed? Of course I do. I have an enemy. There is someone who I hate with all my heart, someone I wish would die horribly. I want to place a curse on that person. That's why I search for this book of magic. I want this curse to work, so I will follow the steps exactly. Step 1. Close your eyes and imagine the face of your enemy. That's simple. I couldn't forget this person's face even if I wanted to. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Step 2. Imagine the curse you want to place on your enemy and what it will do to them. I want this person to suffer the worst kind of pain imaginable. I want them to be suffering so much that they wish they were dead. Alright, what's the next step? Step 3. Open your eyes. Story number 5. Bathroom. I don't like using the bathroom at night. I don't know why, but I have the strangest feeling it's haunted. My wife says I'm just being silly, but it gives me an unsettling feeling. Last night I woke up around 3 a.m. and noticed that the lights were on in the bathroom. I cautiously opened the door and went inside. I was half expecting to see some kind of hideous ghost or have some monstrous creature pounce on me, but nothing happened. The bathroom was empty. I turned off the lights, unlocked the door, and went back to bed. In the morning, my wife told me she must have forgotten to turn the lights off. Story number 6. Mountain climbers. There was a group of 8 college students who all belonged to the mountain climbing club. One day during the winter, they decided to climb the tallest mountain in the area. During the ascent, the weather took a turn for the worse. They ran into trouble and were stranded near the top for 2 weeks. Eventually, a rescue team managed to reach them. There were only 7 survivors. They were airlifted to a nearby hospital. After a few days, 6 of them made a full recovery, But the seventh survivor was so traumatized by the experience that he lost his mind and was put in a mental hospital. The police questioned the remaining 6 about what happened during the 2 weeks they were stranded on the mountain. They asked about what happened to the missing climber. He just wandered off and never came back, they said. The police questioned each of the 6 survivors and they all told the same story. Then, they went to the mental hospital to question the 7th survivor, but they couldn't get any sense out of him. When they asked him what happened to the missing climber, he just kept banging his head against the padded walls and repeating over and over, 8, 8, 8.
Volume 4.
Story 1. Phone. I witnessed a horrible accident today. I wanted to cross the street and was waiting for the light to turn green when a man bumped into me. He didn't even say sorry. I was about to give him a piece of my mind and tell him to watch where he was going, but then I noticed he had a cane. He didn't seem elderly. There must have been something wrong with his legs. Just then, my phone started ringing. The high-pitched ringtone is really annoying. Before I could answer it, there was a screech of tires and a dull thud. The man who bumped into me was lying in the middle of the street in a pool of blood. His sunglasses were lying nearby, cracked and broken. The driver got out and yelled, "He just jumped right out in front of me." The driver thought it was a suicide, but I think the man was just clumsy and didn't look where he was going. It was his own fault. He should have been more careful. Story 2. The Man Next Door. I haven't left my apartment in months. The days go on and nothing changes. Nothing ever happens. Every day is the same as the next. It's monotonous. There's only one thing that keeps me sane. It's the friendly little kid who lives next door. Sometimes she comes over to play. Her mother came home early from work today, so I tell her to leave. I listened at the door and overheard their conversation. "Where were you?" her mother asked. "I was playing with the man who lives next door," the girl replied. "I told you not to tell lies," her mother snapped. Story 3. Haunted Tunnel. There was a tunnel that was said to be haunted. 3 schoolgirls decided to go there one evening to test their courage. When they looked into the tunnel, it was pitch black, and the girls started to lose their nerve. They decided to hold hands and run through the tunnel. They ran through the darkness and didn't stop running until they reached the end. When they came out on the other side, without anything happening to them, the girls were gasping for breath and laughing. "Holding hands made it less scary," said one girl. "I'm glad I was in the middle," said the other. "Me too," said the third. Story number 4. Rejuvenation. Old man. Can you really rejuvenate my body and make me young again? Scientist. Certainly. Our company has developed this machine that will take your cells and use them to generate a young, healthy body. Then your memories will be extracted and transplanted into your new body. Old man. I see. Very good. The old man lay down on a bed and was covered with a sheet. A few hours passed. Old man. This is beginning to take a long time. When will the procedure begin? Scientist. Sorry to keep you waiting. Young man. Thank you. The procedure went so well. By the way, what are you going to do with the old body? Scientist. It will be disposed of here. The scientist wheels the bed into the incineration facility. Old man. Oh, the person before me seems to have had a successful rejuvenation. Anyway, finally it's my turn. Young man. Thank you. Story 5. Bridge Collapse. I crossed the suspension bridge just before 2200 hours last night. I went to the shop and bought some groceries, then returned home. The next day I was watching the news on the local TV station. The reporter said, "Yesterday a suspension bridge collapsed. Several dead bodies were found in the wreckage. They have yet to be identified. The collapse is believed to have happened between 10 and 11 p.m. On the screen, they showed the suspension bridge that I crossed over yesterday.
Volume 5.
Story 1. Funeral Home. A man went to a funeral home to make arrangements for his wife's funeral. The mortician showed him a range of coffins and he picked out the most expensive one. "Only the very best for her," said the man. She always wanted the very best. After making all the arrangements, the man turned to leave. As he was going, the mortician asked, "When did she die?" The man stopped at the door and replied, "She's not dead yet." Story 2. Elevator. I live on the 8th floor of my apartment building. I always take the elevator. One day when I came home from work, I heard something strange in the elevator. It was like a weird scratching sound. I listened to it all the way to my floor. It sounded like some kind of creature scratching the elevator with its claws. The noise sent shivers down my spine. Eventually I got off on my floor, and when the doors opened and I stepped out, the sound stopped. I went into my apartment. That night around midnight, I was awoken by a low, dull sound. Story 3. Older Man. I've been living with an older man for 3 months. One day he was arrested by the police. They made me go with them as well. The police showed me a menu and asked what I wanted to eat. I had a burger and fries. I told them I wanted something cold to drink, so they gave me iced tea. The police said, "I think he's going away for a while." He was charged with 14 offenses. Finally, they were done talking to me. They drove me home in a police car. Everyone was crying when we got there. Story 4. Elevator Buttons. There was a man who lived on the 14th floor of a high-rise apartment building. One night, he came home very late. He got into the elevator and pushed the button for his floor. The button lit up, and the doors closed, and the elevator began to ascend. Just then, the button for the 8th floor lit up. "I guess someone else is getting on," he thought to himself. A few seconds later, he realized something. He started hitting the stop button. The elevator came to a halt on the 3rd floor. As soon as the doors opened, the man jumped out and raced down the stairs. He booked into a hotel for the night, and only went back to his apartment building when it was morning. Story 5. Face Wash. There was a young woman who lived alone. One night, she was getting ready for bed. She went into the bathroom to wash her face. She turned on the tap and the water came gushing out. She splashed some water on her face, then she took some liquid soap and massaged it into her skin. Just then, she thought she heard something. It sounded like footsteps. The soap was still on her face, so she couldn't open her eyes. She fumbled for the tap and turned it on. The water came gushing out. She rinsed off her face, dried it with a towel, and looked around. The bathroom was empty. There was nobody there. Story 6. Luminous. I live alone and there's not much to do in the evenings. To avoid being bored, I took up a new hobby: putting together jigsaw puzzles. I'm working on a luminous jigsaw puzzle right now. The other night, When I came home, the puzzle was glowing faintly in the dark. There's something eerie about that pale, ephemeral glow. It gave me the creeps. When I finish this one, I think I'll go back to doing normal jigsaw puzzles.
Volume 6.
Story 1. Apartment. Today has just been a disaster. I woke up late and had to skip breakfast. Then I forgot to lock the door when I went to work. To make matters worse, my boss spent the entire day yelling at me. I barely make enough to pay the rent. My apartment has just 2 rooms, a bedroom, and a kitchen. It doesn't even have a window facing outside. I missed my bus this evening, so I got home late. And worst of all, when I got back to my apartment and unlocked the door, I found my kitchen had been ransacked. Someone must have broken in while I was at work. I don't know why. I have nothing worth stealing. I'm so tired, I just want to go to bed. I'll file a police report in the morning. Story 2. Public bathroom. I was walking home last night when I felt the urge to poop. I had to use a creepy old public bathroom. It was down at the end of a street full of abandoned houses. Very spooky. I went into the bathroom, opened the door of the first stall, and peeked inside. There was graffiti on the walls. On the right it said, "This bathroom is haunted." And on the left it said, "This writing will change." Creepy, huh? I went into the stall, pulled down my pants, and sat on the toilet. While I was pooping, I started thinking about the strange graffiti. Maybe I'm superstitious, but I just had to take another look. On my right it said, "This bathroom is haunted," and on my left it said, "This writing will change." Huh. So if the writing didn't change, that means the bathroom isn't haunted, right? Story 3. Parents. A young girl was locked in a coal shed. She was crying. Through her tears, she noticed an old lamp sitting among the pieces of coal. She picked it up and began rubbing off the coal dust. Suddenly, a genie appeared and said,
I will grant you 1 wish. Choose wisely, for 1 wish is all I can grant.
"Please make my parents disappear," cried the girl. "I really hate them,"
Your wish is my command.
said the genie.
Go to sleep tonight. Before you wake up in the morning, your wish will be granted.
The next morning, the girl woke up and went downstairs. She found her mother and father sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast. The girl immediately regretted making the wish. She ran out to the coal shed and began rubbing the lamp. The genie appeared and asked,
Are you happy now?
"Please let me take back the wish I made yesterday," begged the girl.
I'm sorry,
Said the genie.
Once a wish has been granted, it cannot be taken back.
The young girl began crying bitterly. Story 4. Identical twins. There were 2 young girls named Mandy and Melissa who were identical twins. They lived with their parents and older brother in a large mansion on the edge of town. Everybody was jealous of the girls, because their father was rich, and he bought them everything they wanted. One dark night, the girls were kidnapped. When they awoke, they found themselves blindfolded and tied to chairs. The girls were extremely frightened and began to cry. Suddenly, Mandy heard a high-pitched voice whispering in her ear. It was the kidnapper. "I have contacted your parents and I am demanding $1 million ransom," he said. "If you try to escape, I will kill Melissa." Then Melissa heard the kidnapper whispering in her ear. "I have contacted your parents, and I am demanding $1 million ransom," he said. "If you try to escape, I will kill Mandy." Story 5. Ball bearing. A man was working in his tool shed when his son came in crying. "What's wrong, son?" asked the father. "Dad, I was playing marbles with the other boys at school," whimpered the little boy. "One of them stuffed a ball bearing in my ear and it won't come out." "Don't worry, son," said the father. "I'm sure I have something here that will get it out." The father's favorite hobbies were science and woodwork. His workshop was filled with all manner of contraptions, gizmos, and inventions. He gazed around his tool shed and his eyes settled on a super strong electromagnet he had built himself. "This machine here is a magnet," he told his son. "The ball bearing is metal, so when I turn this machine on, it will yank the ball bearing out." The man placed his son's ear up against the magnet. He flicked the switch, and there was a loud clang. His son crumpled to the floor, killed instantly.
Volume 7.
Story 1. Humming. The house where I live is very old. It has been in my family for generations. Recently, when I'm in the living room, regardless of whether it's day or night, I keep hearing a humming noise. It sounds almost like a woman's voice humming quietly. It's very faint, and I barely even notice it, but gradually it gets louder and louder. If I try to ignore it, the humming gets so loud that I can hardly concentrate. So, whenever I notice the humming, I recite a prayer out loud, over and over, and that seems to make it gradually fade away. Yesterday, one of my favorite bands released a new album. I've been looking forward to hearing it for ages, so I rushed right out to the store and bought it. When I got home, I decided to listen to it on my headphones. It was even better than I expected. When I finished listening to it, I took off the headphones, and right next to my ear, I heard... Story 2. Witness. My neighbors think I'm a nosy old man, but today, I witnessed a murder. I was looking out my window when I saw something through the window of the apartment building opposite mine. A man was in the middle of murdering a woman. The strange thing was, after he finished strangling her, he turned around, and our eyes met. It was eerie. Then he pointed at me, and kept staring at me for a minute or two. All the time he was staring at me, his finger kept moving. I called the police a few minutes ago, and they told me I'll have to go down to the police station and give a statement tomorrow morning. I'm sure they'll catch him. I saw his face very clearly. Story 3. My son is psychic. It's hard being a father. I recently found out my son is psychic. He's got this habit of pointing at people's faces sometimes. My wife and I realized that whenever our son points at somebody like that, it means they're going to die within 3 days. Last year he pointed at his grandfather. 3 days later, his grandfather died of a heart attack. A few months ago, he pointed at a picture of a famous actress in a magazine. 3 days later, she was killed in a car accident. Today, when I went to turn on the TV, my son was pointing at the screen. When I turned it on, the president was giving a speech. I can't believe the president is going to die, but my son is never wrong. Story 4. My wife was attacked. My wife was attacked by a burglar when I was on my way home from work. She stabbed him with a butcher knife and killed him. The police say it's an obvious case of self-defense. When I went to pick her up from the police station, she said, "When I heard the doorbell, I thought it was you, but then a masked man jumped me as soon as I opened the door." "You must have been so scared," I said. "But you're safe now." I hugged her tightly. Story 5. Murder Weapon. Sometimes I wonder what the police are doing these days. They never seem to be able to solve any crimes. I live in a city that has a lot of crime, and lately it's been getting worse. Last week there was a murder near the factory where I work. A young woman was stabbed with an ice pick. Not just an ordinary ice pick, but one with a skull and crossbones on the handle. Everyone who lives in the area is really freaking out. It's a big city, but this latest murder has everybody talking. It's been pretty heavily covered in the media. My mother, who lives with me, is scared to go out at night. I keep telling her not to worry, but she knows the police are not going to solve the murder. They haven't even found the murder weapon yet. The police are so incompetent. Story 6. Diary. My wife died of cancer in April. For the past 4 months, it's just been me and my son. I don't know what I'd do without him. He's my reason to live. We both miss my wife so much. Today, I was rummaging through some drawers in the bedroom and I found a diary. The handwriting inside is definitely my wife's, but she didn't write very much. The few dated entries she did make are very strange. I flipped to the end to see what she was writing just before she died. This is what she wrote. 2:15. My life with you had just begun. 2:21. I was made to be with you. 3:12. Death cannot separate us. 4:13. I will never let you go. 4:21. I don't have much time. 5:06. Do you understand? I keep reading it over and over, but I can't figure out what she was trying to tell me.
Volume 8.
Story 1. The Woods. A man is walking through the woods at night with a young girl. She begins to exclaim about how creepy the woods are at night. I agree, says the man, especially since I'll be walking back alone. Story 2. Photographs. Me and 3 of my friends went ghost hunting a few nights ago. We each had a camera and went around taking pictures of whatever we could find in an attempt to capture some kind of spirit, or anything scary for that matter. When we got back and went through the pictures, not one single picture showed anything paranormal. So instead I found a picture of the 4 of us and photoshopped a big cartoony ghost in the background. When I showed it to my friend, at first he laughed, then his face turned pale. Story 3. Backpack. There are 2 men lying in the desert. One is alive and one is dead, but both men have backpacks on. The man whose backpack is closed is dead. The man whose backpack is open is alive. How did the man with the closed backpack die? Story 4. Bowling ball. My friend said to me the other day, "Did you know that the human head is the same weight as a bowling ball?" Of course I knew that, I said. He's always reading these dumb books of random facts and feels compelled to share them. Story 5. Special power. I often use the subway to go to work in the morning. One day, when I was waiting for the train, I noticed a homeless man standing in the corner of a subway station, muttering to himself as people passed by. He was holding out a cup and seemed to be begging for spare change. A fat woman passed by the homeless man and I distinctly heard him say, "Pig." Wow, I thought to myself. This homeless man is insulting people and he still expects them to give him money. Then a tall businessman went by and the homeless guy muttered, "Human." Human. I can't argue with that. Obviously he was a human. The next day I arrived early at the subway station and had some time to kill, so I decided to stand close to the homeless man and listen to his strange mutterings. A thin, haggard-looking man passed in front of him, and I heard the homeless guy mutter, "Cow." Cow, I thought. The man was much too skinny to be a cow. He looked more like a turkey or a chicken to me. A minute or so later, a fat man went by and the homeless man said, "Potato." Potato? I was under the impression that he called all fat people pig. That day at work, I couldn't stop thinking about the homeless man and his puzzling behavior. I kept trying to find some logic or pattern in what he was muttering. Perhaps he has some kind of psychic ability, I thought. Maybe he knows what these people were in a previous life. I know many people believe in reincarnation. I observed the homeless man many times and began to think my theory was right. I often heard him calling people things like rabbit or onion or sheep or tomato. One day, curiosity got the better of me and I decided to ask him what was going on. As I walked up to him, he looked at me and said, "Bread." I tossed some money into his cup and asked him if he had some kind of psychic ability. The homeless man smiled and said, "Yes, indeed, I do have a psychic ability. It's an ability I obtained many years ago. But it's not what you might expect. I can't tell the future or read minds or anything like that." "Then, what is your ability?" I asked eagerly. "The ability is merely to know the last thing somebody ate," he said. I laughed because I realized he was right. He said bread. The last thing I had eaten for breakfast that day was toast. I walked away shaking my head. Of all the psychic abilities someone could have, that one must be the most useless.
Volume 9.
Story 1. Friends. 6 friends decided to go camping after graduation. They set up their camp near a big cliff that was supposed to be great for diving. One by one, the friends dove off the cliff and into the water. They each popped up out of the water, laughing and joking. Except for one. They looked around for their missing friend, dove back under, called his name, but he was gone. They didn't see him again. A year later, they found themselves at the same cliff and the same campsite. They saw their friend standing by the water, his head down. They began calling his name and running toward him, but the friend didn't react. As they got closer, they slowed down. In front of their friend were 5 crosses in the ground. Story 2. Little Girl. A little girl disappeared from a park. The parents looked everywhere for her, asking every pedestrian and parent who was there if they saw what happened to their daughter. But no one had seen anything. After going to the police, they had missing posters made up, and a search for the girl ensued. They never found her, and the police surmised that she was most likely dead. A year later, still torn with grief, the parents of the little girl contacted a skilled psychic to get some closure. The psychic went to their home and began to contact the little girl. "She's alive. the psychic exclaimed, her eyes opening suddenly. The parents were overjoyed. "Where is she?" they asked. The psychic once again closed her eyes. "Her heart still beats, and her lungs still breathe." Yes, but where is she?" the parents asked again. The psychic slowly opened her eyes. "She's all over the world." Story 3. Carnival Game. A little boy approached a man at a carnival. "Would you like to play a carnival game?" the man asked. "Sure. What are the rules?" inquired the boy. "Well," said the man, "I have here 10 large airtight boxes. In one of the boxes is the prize money, $500. If you can pick the right box, you get to keep the money." "Is there a time limit?" asked the boy. "No," said the man, "and I'll even give you an advantage. I'll start you off right next to the prize money." "Sure," said the boy. There was no way he could lose. The boy could see the money, even touch it, but he never got to spend any of it, and despite winning the game, he died shortly after. Story 4. Cabin. 3 hikers are forced into an abandoned cabin by a bad storm. The cabin was simple. 4 walls, no lights, and no electricity. There was an eerie sign on the cabin that says, "Come in as you please, but fall asleep, and you will die." Being superstitious, the hikers take this sign seriously and devise a plan so they don't fall asleep. They position a person at each corner and have one person walk against the wall to the next corner and tap the person in that corner. When the person gets tapped, he then follows the wall to the next corner and taps that person, and so on, to ensure no one falls asleep. They manage to keep this up for a couple of hours, when all of a sudden one of the hikers suddenly jumps up and runs out of the cabin screaming, followed by the others. Story 5. Punishment. I awaken in a dimly lit room. A mechanical voice booms over hidden speakers.
"Welcome, contestant."
Contestant? I don't remember signing up for any contest,
"The rules of the game are simple.
says the voice.
Consume all of the meat in this room and you will win. If you do not, as a punishment, you will go through a painful, excruciating death."
At first I think the voice is joking, but then I notice the dead bodies lying on the floor. This is no joke. I quickly begin to search around the room for some kind of exit, but there is none.
"Your challenge begins now,"
says the voice. A plate with a mound of what looks like steak is illuminated in the center of the room. I reluctantly approach the plate. I'm not a vegetarian or anything, but what if the steak is poisoned? What if there's a drug in there and I pass out and wake up in another room facing another ridiculous challenge? I see the red timer counting down, so I reluctantly and carefully begin eating the steak. When it was all done, I declared, "Finished. Now let me out." After a few seconds, the voice boomed.
"Challenge failed. Punishment begins now." Volume 10. Story 1. Haunted House.
To spice up your Halloween, you decide to enter a haunted house with your girlfriend. As you enter, an eerie silence embraces you, and you can see nothing because it's dark. You fumble your way and try to find the light switches, but it turns out to be a waste as there is no electricity connection to the house. When you decide to turn back, the door closes on you and you are trapped in the house with your girlfriend, who has now started panicking. While you're trying to console her, an evil laughter takes you by surprise. Then, you see a faint figure who tells you that you have 3 doors in front of you, and you must take one of them. It is the only way to free yourself. The figure describes that the first door opens up to a compact space filled with a swarm of deadly bees, and you will be stung endlessly by them. The second door opens up to electric chairs. You both will be strapped to the chairs for 5 minutes and exposed to high voltage electricity. The third door opens up with a pit that has no bottom, and you will keep falling endlessly into nothingness. While this leaves you all panicked, which door will you choose if you have no other choice?
Story 2. The Stranger.
In a hotel, a man was sleeping when he heard a knock at the door. He shifted the blanket and stepped down from the bed. He walked to the door and opened it to find a stranger standing outside. Upon opening the gate, the stranger said, "Pardon me, I must have made a mistake. I thought this was my room." The stranger then walked down the corridor and climbed down the stairs. The man closed the door and immediately called security. He asked them to arrest that stranger immediately.
Story 3. Security Camera.
A man had a feeling his house was being broken into while he was asleep, so he bought a security camera to monitor the inside of his house while he slept. The next morning, as soon as he woke up, he pulled his laptop onto the bed to review the footage. All seemed normal until about 2 a.m., when his living room window slowly slid open, and a creature, looked like a gangly old man with bent limbs and a stick-like frame, slid into his apartment. He watched in horror as the thing crawled around his apartment, over his couch, across his floor, and finally into his room, where it slid under his bed. He sped up the video to the point where he woke up. He was so horrified and his heart was beating so fast, he didn't even notice the creaking of floorboards underneath him.
Story 4. Vampire Club.
I recently joined an evening vampire club at my college. It wasn't really what I expected. We sit around and watch old vampire movies and discuss them, or read novels with vampires in them and analyze them. They even planned a field trip to visit some castles that appeared in some classic vampire movies. Last night they had a vampire party, and they said they were serving blood wine. Finally, something interesting. They gave me a cup, and it was dark, red, thick, and warm. And it had an odor almost exactly like blood. I took a sip, but it wasn't blood. A little disappointing.
Story 5. Present.
I can't believe how expensive toys are getting. I went to the store to buy a present for my daughter's birthday, and it was so hard to find something that she would enjoy that is also affordable. I ended up finding a doll from a thrift store that was still sealed in the box. Right above the batteries not included tag was a price label that read $10. For a doll of this quality, $10 is a steal. So I bought it and I kept it wrapped in the closet until my daughter's birthday. When the day came, I handed her the present. She ripped open the wrapping paper and squealed with excitement as she opened the case and removed the doll. She hugged it tightly and the doll said, "I love you." I'm glad she likes the present. It ended up being a really nice day.
Volume 11. Story 1. Immortals.
I was sitting at home watching TV when the phone rang. A sweet voice on the other end of the line said, "Hello, may I have some of your time?" She sounded nice, so I said, "Okay, sure, what's up?" There was an awkward pause on the phone. I couldn't have said anything wrong, could I? I was just about to say something when she said, "Thank you," and hung up. I guess I wasn't interesting enough to talk to. I went to the bathroom, and when I was washing my hands, I glanced up at the mirror. My hair is a little longer than I remember. I rubbed my face. Could have sworn I shaved this morning, too.
Story 2. Baby Monitor.
It's hard taking care of our baby while my wife is visiting her parents. I have to cook, clean, change, make sure he has something to do, keep him out of trouble. It's really exhausting. On top of that, there's a lot of housework that has to be done. I had to fix the garage door, change the bulb on the porch light, power wash the deck. I just collapsed in bed. I woke up groggily in the middle of the night thinking I should check on our son, but when I heard my wife singing to him over the baby monitor, I figured she could handle it, so I went back to bed.
Story 3. Camping.
A young aspiring photographer decided to camp solo in the woods for a day to see if she could get some nice shots of her portfolio. She brought her camera, phone, camping supplies, and some food and water. She took a ton of pictures of trees, birds, rivers, and even her campfire lighting up in the night sky. She was excited to see what they looked like when she got home and uploaded them to her computer. She set up camp, adjusted the alarm clock on her phone, and went to bed. The sun beaming through the flaps of her tent woke her up. Her phone alarm didn't go off, and it was a little later than she intended. She quickly packed up her camera gear, camping gear, and clothes, and made her way out of the remote campsite back to her car. Back at home, she was looking through the nature pictures. These were really good, she thought to herself. She decided to use the picture of the tent with the sunrise behind it as her portfolio picture. I'll definitely get some clients after they check out this portfolio, she thought to herself.
Story 5. Fortune Teller.
One night, a young man was walking through the streets when he spotted a middle-aged woman sitting at a table. There was a crystal ball in front of her and a little sign that read, "Fortune Teller." Out of curiosity, the young man sat down opposite her. "Would you like me to do a reading for you?" the fortune teller asked. "No, not for me," the young man replied. "I want you to do a reading for my older brother." The fortune teller nodded and asked for some basic information about his older brother, such as his name, age, and date of birth. The young man didn't actually have an older brother. He just wanted to test the fortune teller and prove that she was a fake. He gave her his own name and date of birth, but when it came to the age, he lied. He told her he was 28 when in fact he was only 23. "So your brother is 28 years old?" the fortune teller confirmed. The young man smiled and nodded. The fortune teller concentrated and held her hand over the crystal ball. All of a sudden her demeanor changed and all the color drained from her face. She grabbed some books and began frantically leafing through them. The young man watched her with a satisfied smirk on his face. Eventually, the fortune teller wiped the sweat from her brow and looked at the young man doubtfully. "I'm sorry, is your brother in good health?" she asked. He's fine," the young man replied. "Please tell him to take care of himself," she said. She kept repeating it over and over. The young man began to get scared. "Why are you saying that?" he asked. The fortune teller looked at him gravely and said, "Because according to the divination, your brother should have died 5 years ago today."
Volume 12. Story 1. Dating website.
I was going through a dating website looking at the profiles, when I saw a picture of a girl I knew. I recognized her immediately because we had gone to school together. Back then, we were friends, and I had a little crush on her. I thought it might be cool to get in touch with her again, so I sent her a message. Me. Sarah, is that you? It's me, Ryan, remember? We went to junior high school together. A few minutes later, I get a reply. Her. Ryan? Wow. Of course I remember. How long has it been? Me. Too long. I was surprised to find you on this site. You haven't changed a bit. Still as cute as ever. What are you doing now? Her. I'm at a university. Me. Oh, you mean Tompkins University? So you stayed close to home. Her. Yes. Me. Wow, that's great. You always got good grades in school. Her. Well, recently some workmen have been doing construction on my street. There's so much noise I can hardly concentrate on my studies. Me. They're doing construction on Maple? Her. Yeah, looks like they're building a new convenience store. Me. That's right. I remember there was a vacant lot next to your house. Her. Not anymore. That's where they're building. Me. Remember that time I came to your house and we got ice cream and went for a walk in the park down the road? That was the best. If you're free sometime, we should do that again. I didn't get a response for a few minutes, but when I read the reply, it struck me as kind of odd. Her. Found it. Thanks for the help.
Story 2. Strange Dream.
There was a married couple who lived together. The husband said that every night for about a month, he'd been having the same strange dream. He wasn't even sure if it was a dream. In the middle of the night, I suddenly wake up and see a person clinging to the ceiling. The person looks exactly like me. He turns his head around to look at me and says, "You have already lived enough. Let's change places." Every morning when the husband came down to breakfast, he would say to his wife, "I had that strange dream again last night." The wife began to get very worried about him. But one morning when the husband came down to get breakfast, all he said was "good morning." The wife was surprised and asked him, "Did you have that strange dream again last night?" The husband smiled.
Story 3. Wishing Death.
Have you ever been so angry at someone that you wished they were dead? I think everyone must experience that feeling at some point in their lives. But what if that wish became reality? The first time I remember it happening was when I was in kindergarten. I had a fight with one of the other boys in my class. The next day he died. I thought it was just a coincidence. When I was in elementary school, I had a teacher who had a bad temper. One day, for no reason, he pushed me severely. He beat me with a cane until my backside was black and blue. I cried myself to sleep that night, all the while thinking to myself, I wish that teacher was dead. The next day when I arrived at school, they told me the teacher had died. When I was in junior high school, all the members of a group of bullies who had been harassing me suddenly died. By then I was convinced of it. I have the ability to kill someone just by wishing they were dead. I was afraid. I couldn't tell anyone. To have some peace of mind, I thought that I would have to go through life being very careful not to get angry with anyone. Still, sometime after I started high school, I had an argument with a group of my friends. I tried my best not to be angry with them, but it didn't do any good. They all died. I was horrified. It seemed that people would die even if I didn't strongly wish for it. Depressed and distraught, I decided to confide in my mother. I couldn't stop crying as I told her that I had the ability to kill people with my thoughts. My mother was surprised. She didn't believe it at first, but when I told her about all the people around me who had died, she gradually came to accept that it was true. When my father came home from work, she talked to him about it. Both of my parents smiled and said, "That must be very hard for you. We know you're a good boy. We know you would never really wish to harm anyone, especially not your own parents." I'm glad I could talk to them about it. I thanked my father and my mother for being so understanding. It was a great relief to have that burden off my shoulders. That night when I went to bed, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. However, the next morning when I woke up, the house was strangely quiet. I found my father and mother upstairs, lying dead in their beds.